spawn from this and grow from this. I knew this is what would level me up. Then you had these more boutique restaurants with Michelin stars that were doing exciting and dynamic stuff. $10 in my wallet, and I said to my wife, I'm not going to work for anyone else from here on in. That's it. And then I was mortgaged up to my eyeballs and leveraged up to my eyeballs. But do you know what? I was 25, 26. I didn't care. You're all right now. You can come out of hiding. I felt like that. I felt like it was kind of all right again. Okay, we forgive you. But the strategy there was, I've just lost my shirt pretty dramatically, and that hurt. And I ain't going back there again. This is not going to happen again. The quicker you realise that, and the quicker you get comfortable being uncomfortable, the more successful you will be.
Adam, how are you?
Well, thanks, Olly. Thanks for having us.
An absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to today as we end 2024. How's the year been for you?
Well, good question. It's been a good year, actually.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, for us, it's been a good year, an interesting one. Few things that have happened we wouldn't have expected. We've got a few things over the line that we were hoping to. But overall, I'd put it down as a really successful year, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a lot today about restaurants, businesses, food, a big variety of stuff I want to ask you about. But just to settle things in, to give people a bit of context, I understand you were pretty much born into food with both your parents being in the food world. What was life growing up like for you?
That is true to a sense. It sounds a lot more romantic than it actually is. My mum, my grandfather cooked in the army, and my mum cooked for a few years professionally before she had me. But in all honesty, that's about it. My life growing up was very much in a working class family. My dad was a window cleaner. Worked incredibly hard. Didn't see a great deal of him because of that. And we lived a very simple life in Essex in a 3-bed semi, very nice, loving, caring, warm family. But we weren't sort of in any way exuberant but we did eat well because mum cooked really nice food. Nice.
And was that a big influence for you kind of growing up, the importance of food, I guess, as opposed to the techniques and the passion of it, just the way food brings together?
I've never really put that link together between mum cooking and what the food meant at home to me taking up cooking as a career. There were a couple of things that happened actually that triggered that for me. I went on a French exchange, and there was a real sort of pivotal moment for me, that discovery of something completely different food-wise. And then I had a set of godparents, actually, these two amazing guys that are no longer with us, God bless them. And they took me under their wing, and they really looked after me. They took me to restaurants. They were slightly more funded. They took me to restaurants, and then they bought me my first set of knives when I went to college, and they supported me with my endeavors to become a chef. And I think them taking me to restaurants, these really beautiful old Italian restaurants in the east of London that were full of all the plastic wine bottles and plastic grapes in the ceiling, but they had these dessert trolleys and poached oranges in brandy and all these incredible Dober-Sol dishes that I was eating in my teenage years, which was completely different, and that was definitely inspiring. Yeah,
amazing.
I think it was triggered by that kind of
yeah. And it feels like work was kind of drilled into you quite young as the importance of it, right? Because I read somewhere that you had 2 paper rounds, a milk round, and you were working at Primark.
Yeah, that's
when
exactly
you were
right.
super young. I mean, what was that? Was that environment always you should go out and create opportunity, or was it just from yourself? You wanted to go and make something?
Well, firstly, you've done your homework, that's for sure. But yeah, I think, look, my dad was a window cleaner, worked very, very hard. I come from a family and a sort of tribe of people that hustle, right? That was about hustle. It was about getting on, not beyond the law or anything like that, but certainly everyone I knew hustled and did stuff and sold stuff and made stuff. And I don't know, it was just kind of in my blood. And my dad worked really hard in his own business. My uncle had his own business. Pretty much everyone I know was like that. And I got a couple of paper rounds, started to quite enjoy having the little, the bit of money, the sort of £15 a week that I was getting, was enjoying that. And get a milk round with a milkman come round, and was working with my dad on a Saturday, and then I had a little car cleaning round with cleaning cars with my mates and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, it was also hated school. That was part of this was a sort of escapism from school.
Why did you hate it? Just the experience of that?
Yeah, listen, school is a very linear thing that's cut out for certain people.
Yeah.
In a bad way, and it still is actually. It's still retrofitted for a certain type of person to be spat out the other end as an academic, and it doesn't suit everyone, and it did not suit me. And because of that, I sort of fell short, was unhappy there, didn't enjoy academia at the time, and didn't get on with it. So I was looking for anything else to do to fill my time, really. And earning money and working, I love that. I really enjoyed that from an early age, and just having a few quid in my pocket, felt like I was doing something, felt like I had a purpose.
I think it's so important, right? And particularly in, I guess, today's world, I was very much similar, kind of growing up wanting to just do things. It wasn't really about making heaps of cash, doing a paper round. It was just having that sense of purpose, right? And a little bit of kind of putting something into something and getting something out. That was always a thing for me that felt quite addictive in
very much
many ways.
Yeah, very much so. I think, the other thing, my dad's always very like, I want that pair of trainers, Dad. He's like, yeah, absolutely, mate. You go and earn the money, you can have them, no problem. Having stuff related to working, there was nothing in between. So it was, and I understood that. I didn't resent that or look at it any other way. I didn't have any friends that were also getting stuff, just thrown at them.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a case of, okay, I'll go out to work, I'll get that pair of trainers. I understand that equation. I get that. That's a rule for life, right? And that's it.
Makes sense. And outside of working, the skateboarding thing.
Yeah.
Tell me about this. Because I don't think many people know much about this, but it kind of creeps up every so often.
It does.
Where did that come from? Because you're listed as technically a professional skateboarder when you were younger.
I was sponsored by lots of lovely camping and bits and pieces.
So how did this kind of how did it get?
I spend my life on a skateboard, anything solitude, from the age of sort of 10 up until 16.
Yeah.
All I did was skateboard. That was about it. I'd work and go to school every now and then. That was my life. And I did it a lot. I had a lot of mates with it. I found a little tribe of people and just really enjoyed it. And I love the solitude of it. I loved sort of drifting around mindlessly doing it. I love the lifestyle. And begrudgingly gave it up when I started full-time at work. But
yeah,
there happened to be a skate park kind of where I lived that was relatively famous. And so therefore I hung out with people magazine people and people like that. So I just ended up doing a bit of magazines and stuff.
Yeah. Was it ever something you thought, was there a sort of, 10 years old is a really young age to be
I was
involved in
14,
that.
15 when I was competent, I think. But there was never a point where I thought this is going to be a big part of my life. I was actually living my best life, with no care in the world.
It's great.
There's no purpose or strategy to this whatsoever. I was just me and on a skateboard.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's something quite nice about that. It was just really freeing and really nice. Do you know what? I went on a skateboard last week, believe it or not. There's a post coming out on my Instagram tomorrow, which is kind of a collab we've done with a trainer brand, which is amazing. And I'm on a skateboard in that, only for like 1 second.
Yeah.
Because it's the trainer brand has got a skateboarding link, so they sort of added that in there. It's quite fun. It was quite funny.
That is really cool.
Yeah, but not anymore.
Yeah, shame. I mean, you've got a different career now.
Never say never.
Exactly, yeah, who knows? For you, up to your kind of the skateboarding thing led until you started going to the work stuff, right? And that's obviously starting to go to a different form of education. So when you were 16, you kind of immersed yourself in the food space. Before you tell me more about that, where does that link come from? How all of a sudden really wanting to go into food?
Do you know what? I think it's more about a lack of options.
Right.
Food was something that was on the table as I quite like that.
Yeah.
That table wasn't full of anything else, right? There wasn't, I quite like mending cars, or I quite like putting scaffolding up, quite like building walls, quite like, the options are limited. I've not got any schooling here, and I'm definitely going to be working with my hands. Don't like any of those other things. And so it was kind of a case of I'm going to work for my dad, or I quite like this food arena. I love these restaurants and that kind of stuff. So honestly, it's like a sort of just lack of options and no plan B and process of elimination, right?
Yeah.
And I went to a careers open day. There was an apprenticeship at Claridge's hotel. as an apprentice chef. And I just thought I've got to give that a go, right? But I was throwing stuff at the wall. I wasn't there was no strategy here. There wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a chef and I'm going to own restaurants. I'm going to, you know, cook all that beautiful ravioli my grandma showed me making on No, not about that at all. I wanted to work, and there weren't many other options.
And going to Claridge, had you been to Claridge's before?
No. I'd never got on the tube before. I lived in Essex, the very, very end of the district line with my parents, and lived my whole life there. I'd only been abroad once, and I was 16, and that was a French exchange. And then I went up to this careers open day, and there was the apprenticeship at Claridge's, and I took that apprenticeship training day or immersion day, got on the tube, another tube, and then did the day at Claridge's, and it was an absolutely mind-blowing, eye-opening day.
Yeah, tell me about that day. Yeah, what was it?
It was just terrifying because there's another story there, but I was very small. I was only 5'2" at the age of 16.
Oh, wow.
I was actually 15 when I did that trial day, and I walked into Claridge's. I'd got this apprenticeship immersion day, walked into Claridge's. I'd got my one-day apprenticeship, day release apprenticeship in Barking Dagenham College, and I walked into Claridge's and did this whole day with them. And it was just, I think the scale of it and the overwhelm of being in this enormous kitchen, with 80 plus chefs, of a hierarchy where I was kind of minus level 2 on the lift, but and just watching these grown-up men just, you know, go about their business was quite incredible. They were really good at it, and there was an amazing amount of respect and hierarchy, and the volumes of food, the pace people were working at, being on your feet for, I think I was there for 8-9 hours, whatever, being on your feet for that amount of time, the heat, the steam, the shouting, but the shouting of checks and, you know, the noise and everything. It was just incredibly overwhelming for a 15-year-old. And funny enough, I dropped my daughter did an immersion day in a restaurant this week.
Oh, wow.
And I dropped her into a restaurant. She's just 16. And I took her into a restaurant to work in the kitchen for a day. And I had this, I left her there. She was incredibly nervous.
Do you know the kitchen?
Yes, I set it up.
Nice.
But I dropped her in there, and she was incredibly nervous. I left her there. I walked out, and I had this real moment of sort of PTSD of that day. I went into Claridge's like that. It still sat with me, and it was like crystal clear in my mind. It was quite weird. But listen, I did it, and it was really overwhelming. I got a tube home, and my parents were kind of like, okay, how, you know, ready to start work? And I said, I can't do that. That's too much.
Really?
Just too difficult. And I was, you know, crying, and found the whole thing just completely over the top. And my dad was pretty blunt about it. It wasn't, not from a sort of nasty perspective or anything like that. And there wasn't a case of, that's okay. Why don't you hang about on the sofa for a couple of months until you can find another job somewhere? It was a case of, okay, I'll pick you up I'll give you a knock in the morning and you're coming to work with me then. If you're not working there, you're working for me, because there aren't any other options on the table, right? And you need to work because you finished school now. So this is done. I'd only finished school 3 days ago.
3 days?
It wasn't like I had a gap weekend.
Yeah.
That was it.
Gap weekend.
And but I certainly didn't do A-levels or university or anything. I barely scraped through school. But and I just didn't want to work for my dad. I did want to work with my dad, actually. I'd love to work with my dad, but I didn't want to be a window cleaner. I just felt like I wanted to do something on my own. That was actually I wanted to be my own person. So I just said, okay, well, I'll just have to man up and get on with it.
And you went back?
I went back the next day and stayed there for 5 years.
Amazing. Quick question. Did you give your daughter any advice when you dropped her off? What's the best advice to give someone on those days?
Yeah, we had lots of chats about it. But one of the key things I think I said to her was, remember that you are not there to be judged today, Rosie. It's more about you judging whether this is the right environment for you, rather than worrying about them judging you as to whether this is the right environment for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, definitely.
So worry about. I'll reframe that for you, because that was very confusing. But it was more about telling Rosie that that day is all about, for her, assessing whether this is the right environment for her, rather than the restaurant assessing her as to whether she's right for the environment. And I think that's quite an important thing for someone going in for an immersion day like that, because it's quite, otherwise you just get that complete overwhelmed feeling that everyone's looking at me and judging me. Actually, they're not. You should be more worried about, do I want to spend 2 years of my life with these people? Are they my tribe? Are they my people? And do I love the food and connect with it? That's really important.
Because it's so interesting in your world that there are these immersion days and stages and all these different variables where every other industry, like my industry, doesn't really exist. You know, it's a 3-round interview process, and that's where, you know, again, I've hired and interviewed a lot of people in my time, and that's a thing that's always in my mind is like, well, you know, you have to test us as much as we're testing you and getting that right, because that's longevity and that's going to mean something in the future. But it's so important, and it's great, amazing advice.
Well, it's a good thing in restaurants that we do trial days and stagiaires and things like that. And I know it's not common in other industries, but actually it's very interesting, because we get to see, when you go and do a stagiaire or a trial day, you get to see the culture of that restaurant, and you get to work out. I could work out within 5 or 6 hours whether I could connect with those people and the food and the environment, and did I want to work in this bubble, you know, because it's also really, once you're in that bubble with that restaurant, you're in it. It's more of your life than anything else in your life, right? So it's really important that you get that bit right. So in a way, I think it's a good thing that we do that in our industry.
I mean, I think it's even more transferable, to be honest.
If I owned a marketing agency, that's what I would do. You can say that.
So you go back to Claridge, and as you said, that you were there for 5 years. And is this sort of 90s? Is this that period of time? When is this?
Yeah, it's late 80s, yeah.
Because you did say that cooking in the 90s was a magical time for you. And the best time, I think, is what you did actually say.
I think London was on fire. And
tell me about that time.
It was just incredible. Well, firstly, I got my time at Claridge's was via an apprenticeship as well. So I didn't do that apprenticeship in Barking and Dagenham College, a day release thing. I actually ended up doing a 5-year apprenticeship with the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts. And that was a block release. So I was in Bournemouth for 6 months, then back at Claridge's for 9 months, and just repeated that for 5 years.
Got you.
Under the mentorship of John Williams and Mary Lesnick at Claridge's. And it was just absolutely incredible. I didn't feel anything but grateful for that opportunity and for that apprenticeship. It was hard.
Right.
It was challenging. It was difficult, but I felt so grateful for that opportunity. It was the first time I felt like anyone in academia had invested in me, in my learning, if you like, not academia, but in my learning. Had invested in me, and I was really grateful for it, and I loved it. But you know what, the 90s, so I left Claridge's and probably in the early 90s. And then I went to another hotel with John Williams for a short period of time. And then I just wanted to get into restaurants. Marco was kind of emerging from Harvey's. That was the end of Harvey's and all that craziness going on. He was on telly. The Brew Brothers was on telly. Nico was on telly. Raymond Blanc was on telly. These chefs were like emerging, like coming out from in the woodwork. It was amazing. The noise that chefs were starting to make at that point, mainly through a lot of great PR agents actually, but it all just became a bit rock and roll. There were a very small handful of fantastic Michelin star restaurants, but not that many in London. And so you know, if you were in one of these Michelin star restaurants, you were kind of on the front line, if you like. You know, you were part of a band of people who were doing it at the sharp end. Because
the Michelin scene was kind of growing a lot.
It was growing, but it was still very small. Right. Honestly, there were still only, I don't know the number, but probably 10 or 12 Michelin star restaurants in London. That's obviously an incredibly different story now. But that's what it was. And I wanted to be part of that. I really felt I was I'd done my training. I loved this lifestyle. Right. I was immersed in this lifestyle as a chef. I loved it. I loved the graft. I loved the grit. I loved how hard it was. I loved feeling tired and going at it. But I wanted this at another level. Yeah. I hadn't fallen in love with food. That's quite important, I think, to understand. I'd been to this apprenticeship. I'd fallen in love with the processes of cookery, right? The order of things, and the understanding of the way things came together, and the processes and the craft and all that stuff. I fell in love with that. I loved that. the way we store things in nice straight lines and all those kind of things, you know. Fell in love with all of that. But I wasn't kind of like a box of chanterelles would arrive and I would get super excited and smell them. And that was kind of that, you know, elated me. I didn't have any of that.
Interesting.
This was what I did at Claridge's was learn how to be disciplined, how to work smart, how to work in a big band of people, in a big hierarchy, how to sort of hustle and get my, you know, work my way around this kitchen and get what I wanted from people and survive really in a really grown up environment. It was only when I left and I wanted more. And when I left, I went to the Square. That seemed like that was a restaurant that was kind of on the cutting edge. It was a Michelin star restaurant and it was doing things that were really impressive. And that felt like it was going to be a big step up for me and somewhere where I could really start to sort of, you know, take this to another level. But it's there that I absolutely fell in love with food.
What position did you join the Square at?
I don't know. You just went in as a cook. I don't even think that was a...
Really?
I don't know. Probably a chef party, but I haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
I just rung and I said, have you got a job? They said, yes. I turned up and I started working. I didn't even know what was getting paid. I just turned up and honestly, it was like that. And I got on with it, but very quickly I fell in love with it. I mean, it was a fairly Band of Brothers pirate ship type thing, but it was doing some of the most incredible food. And I just remember the pace of it, the volume, the relentlessness of that restaurant was, you couldn't help but fall in love with it. It was just incredible. It was your whole life. You know what I was saying about, you know, Claridge's and being a chef, it kind of owns more of your life than the rest of it.
Yeah.
This owned all of my life.
Why was that different?
There was no other life. It was just that. It was the Square and sleep. That was pretty much my life. I think I got to the cinema once a week with my girlfriend, but that was it.
But why was that different from what you were doing at Claridge's?
Because the hours and the intensity was just greater. We were in earlier, home later, working more hours, working more days. And in those days, the hours were really quite punishing and incredible. But, you know, I was learning. I was loving it. I don't think I've ever been happier. I mean, it was an amazing time.
Wow. And for you joining there, was that because you were really now set on the career? You knew that food is what you wanted to do?
Oh, I love this industry. At that point, I loved this industry. I was absolutely into it. I was buzzing from it and I wanted more. I was hungry for it. And I wanted a bit of this kind of rock and roll that was going on. This was exciting.
What was that rock and roll? Because unfortunately, I don't remember it. But like, what was that?
Well, it was just kind of Marco was throwing people out of restaurants and getting
Yeah.
headlines all the time, and restaurants were then being reviewed, and
Yeah.
there were chefs all on the telly lots, and chefs were being talked about, and restaurants were the new edge, and this was the 90s, and Kate Moss and Oasis and Blur and all that kind of stuff that went on, and this was like a magical time in London. It was all very that Britpop era, and restaurants were very much part of that. You know, people were still smoking in restaurants. You could just sort of imagine that, bottles of wine and smoking in restaurants, and all the great music of the 90s, and restaurants were a really big part of that fabric. They were dynamic and powerful places, and you know, the Comrade restaurants were causing, you know, massive noise, and then you had these more boutique restaurants with Michelin stars that were doing exciting and dynamic stuff, and people were buzzing off of that, and it was great. You know, it was a really energetic, amazing time. But equally, I'm remembering this from a point of view of someone being 22. So I had no care in the world, no mortgage, no children, no school fees, no restaurants to worry about. I didn't care. I didn't even know how much I earned. I just got up in the morning and went to work. So of course for me it was rock and roll, right? So you have to remember that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, you're mentioning talent in kitchens at the very top, but I imagine also talent alongside you, below you, next to you, etc. The people you must have worked with even at the Square. I mean, the experience you must have had must have been amazing.
Really good point. You know, that was another part of, I definitely knew that the people at Claridge's, I now wanted to work against people or work next to people. You see, I even said against people, which is unhealthy slightly, but I knew it was a competition in a way. If I wanted to be successful, there is a competition in this. I do need to be better than the person I'm standing next to as much as I can try. And I knew that I needed to stand next to people that were definitely better than me. And when I went to the square, that kitchen was full of brilliant cooks. If you go through the roll call of people that came through the square over the period of time that I was there and came out the other end, there is some talent in that. There was some talent that came through that restaurant. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And to be standing next to cooks that were quicker than me, older than me, faster than me, knew more than me, they just were all over this. I found that both intimidating but exciting, because I knew that I would spawn from this and grow from this. I knew this is what would level me up.
Did you ever have like a moment where you felt that you were falling behind those around you? Because I think it's a great ethos, right? To be in a pond where you're the small fish and there's lots of other big fish around you, right? As opposed to being the big fish in a small pond. But like for you, was there ever, I mean, the pace and the competition, as you're saying, daily must have been getting a challenge, right? It's daily keeping up with us, pushing forward and all those variables. Was there ever a moment where it was moving at such a pace that you were struggling to keep up? Or was it always a sense of we're in this together, we grow and learn as a team?
No. There was never a point I didn't think I was keeping up. I was just single-minded. It was the only thing I cared about or did in life. I got up and I did that.
Yeah.
I did it to the best of my ability, full till, full send. I'm in.
Is that
I didn't, there was no distractions. I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs, I just worked, right? And so if you're giving something everything, and the more I did it, it was kind of self-propelling. The more I did it, the more I wanted it. And I wanted it. I was now looking around when I was working at the square, looking for harder restaurants. And there were harder restaurants. I kind of was into this. I loved it. I loved that. But, there was a lot of bravado about the less you slept, the more hours you worked, the more covers you did, the harder it was. Those were kind of kudos points, right? They were currency.
Yeah.
That's incredibly unhealthy on one hand. And I'm so pleased that we now have an industry that isn't built on that. And I'm proud of that industry is not like that anymore. However, I wouldn't change it for the world, weirdly enough, because, I got my 10,000 hours real quick, right?
I do believe in that rule. It's so important.
And yeah, and I got good and I got quick. By the age of 25, I was flying as a 25-year-old. I was running kitchens at 25 and I was capable. I had a craft. I'd been in the kitchens for 10 years at the age of 25.
Crazy.
I'd worked an incredible amount of hours.
Yeah.
And I always remember in this feeling, kind of going up the escalator at Bond Street station, thinking to myself, this week I've worked double these people on this escalator. I've worked twice the hours. Therefore, do I get out at the other end do I retire early? That hasn't happened.
I was going to say, I was like, out.
No, that didn't work out. But equally, am I learning at twice the pace? And I reckon the answer was yes.
How did you manage your ego at that point?
Ooh.
Looking back.
I don't know. I think I was pretty chipper and a bit arrogant and a bit young, and that was to do with it when I was at Claridge specifically, but that was to do with insecurity, it was to do with my age, it was to do with the way that I am neurologically, a lot of those things, and the way I didn't understand how to deal with those things and cope with things. So that was kind of coming out, that was me expressing myself in a way that I was just out of my depth and just not understanding how to cope with myself.
Sure.
That's fine. And it never got to a point where it was a massive problem. I never got sort of sacked or anything like that.
No.
But I wasn't particularly, I've never been a massive team player. I've never been much about empathy for looking after other people and things like that up until this sort of chapter of my life.
Yeah.
So I wasn't about that. I was very selfish, very self-centered, very self-motivated. It was all about me just getting on and doing things and very focused on that. But I think once I went to the square, because I was surrounded by so much talent and this restaurant was such a powerhouse, such a force, there was no room for that. You came in, you did your job, and there wasn't any room for anyone to be kind of getting weird and wonderful.
Yeah.
So I didn't have an ego like that at all, I don't think.
Yeah. How long were you at the square for?
I don't know, a good 4 years, I think.
Yeah. And then because
A chunk of time, a really meaningful chunk of time, but also importantly, from the old square in King Street, which is where it was in the beginning, I was part of the team that moved it to its second incarnation on Bruton Street, where it was awarded 2 stars. And that was an incredible moment in the square's history.
Yeah.
And Phil was watching Phil go through that, and how we dealt with that was always an amazing thing for me to sort of have in my bank to look back on and think and sort of sense check myself about a few things. And that was an incredible time. But you have to remember, it went from 1 to 2 stars, but equally was doing 100 covers for lunch and 100 covers for dinner. At that level,
that's crazy.
there currently aren't very many two Michelin star restaurants to do that level.
So 200 covers a day.
Yeah, and 7 days a week.
7.
Yeah.
Wow.
Saturday lunch and Sunday lunch, I think, from memory.
So slight reduction. That process of going from 1 to 2, stars wise.
Yeah.
What does that really feel like when you're in that team? Because you have the confidence of 1, but you're going to 2, which is a big jump. And forgive me, I don't know at the time how many other restaurants there would have been in the 2-star level, particularly in London, let alone the UK. But what's that process really feel like as a team? Because I guess you have, like I say, a level of confidence as a team and the name and the restaurant and everything that comes with that. But to push to that next level, what does that really feel like when you're in a team?
Yeah, okay. So the technical end of that, I can't really answer, because I was just one of the team of many chefs in that restaurant that was just grafting away, doing what we were told. I was nowhere near the strategy end of that, or sure it would work. But what I would say is that the Square was a very unique position there, because it was a very competent, brilliant 1-star restaurant in King Street, but it was a very different restaurant to what it moved to in Bruton Street, that opened as a beautifully refitted, brand new, all singing, all dancing restaurant that was clearly a cut above the previous restaurant.
Oh, right.
And so therefore, you know, and also Phil was incredibly focused on leveling it up in terms of the crockery and the sharpness of the food, and adding perhaps canapes and petit fours and amuses and things like that. So he'd clearly leveled up the game of the food. The restaurant had clearly leveled up. The kitchen space and the ability we had, the facilities we had leveled up. So I think it was fairly obvious and quite strategically obvious that that restaurant movement was going to move into a higher echelon.
Yeah.
But I think as a team at that era, I don't think we were that fussed about that. We were just literally in the shed for 18 hours a day. And all we cared about was, were we going to have enough sea bass for lunch? We weren't bothered about whether this restaurant got more stars or whatever. That was none of our business.
Really?
Our business was, are we going to be on place for lunch? Because very much of the time you were not.
So it's so day to day and it's so relentless that you guys in the building aren't even thinking about, I guess, the bigger picture in some ways.
Absolutely. Actually thinking about whether I'm going to have enough time to go for a piss. Let alone whether no idea. You didn't see the dining room for the first 6 months. I just came in the back door,
Pressed in the back.
prepped more fish than you'd ever want to see in your life. Cooked it all, sold it all, went back out the back door again. That was it.
Amazing. I mean, your relationship with Phil must have developed in many ways, because didn't you go on to then work on a project outside of the Square for him?
Yeah, we did here in Fulham, actually. Yeah, we did. We did a restaurant here in Fulham in Parsons Green. We opened a restaurant in a photography studio together after I'd finished at the Square. And that was fantastic working with him. Phil has always been a huge part of my life. But you know, we all work really hard, so I don't really get to see him that often. I've been away with him. We've got a fishing trip together next year, which is super exciting. Right. We have dinner with the wives and stuff, and we have lots of texts and chats, but we don't hang out all the time, because that's just the nature of the worlds we live in. We're so busy people, and he is too. But we did that restaurant together here in Fulham, and that was great fun for a couple of years. Yeah, it was a real learning curve for me, because it kind of went from that really manic, full on kitchen there to this kind of much more quaint little thing there. But it was kind of like part of that chapter of my life, because my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we moved to Fulham while we did that. and then we got married during that period of time. So that was kind of all.
Was that your first head chef position?
Yeah, but I mean, it was a little bistro inside a photographic studio. So you're not going to sort of sit at the top of my CV. I'm particularly not going to even have a CV actually, but no, I was the head chef, but it was not like that. So there was only a few of us in the kitchen. Yeah, it was more about just doing good food.
Yeah, and at this stage, kind of, I'm getting the impression you maybe don't think too much in the future in some ways, particularly in your earlier years where you're setting goals and aspirations as much, but then moving into a head chef position in something that feels like it was a little bit quieter day to day, as much as you're still running an establishment. You know, were you wanting a little bit of downtime, if you will, a bit of a more relaxing, day to day outside of everything you just done for the previous kind of 9 years?
I think I wasn't looking for it. Actually, I was going to open a restaurant down in Sussex with a mutual friend of Phil and I's. That was what I was going to do. But that never came to fruition. I wasn't looking for anything easier, actually. I would have been justified to, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
But it just so happened that was a slightly more balanced work life. But I think what does occur to me at that point in my career, I'd now done a good 25. I've done a good 10 or 11 years at a very high level, working a lot of hours. I was only 26 or something. And I just thought, I knew in my mind that I then went and worked. Actually, what I did, I went to work in 3 or 4 other restaurants, stages, as we talked about, into great restaurants, 1 and 2 Michelin star restaurants.
Wow.
Just to have a look and see where this was. And after that 4 or 5 week period of time, I definitely checked in with myself and realized that I didn't want to work in those kind of restaurants. I didn't like them as much as the Square. I didn't really like working for other people.
Right.
And I felt like now I wanted to work for myself. That penny was dropping at that point. And I just wasn't that enthused about going to work for all these other great chefs. There was, Richard Neat was still doing his thing. Gordon was at the Aubergine and Marcus Waring was at the Orangery, and obviously Nico and the Brew Brothers at Gavros. Those restaurants were all there. It was all on the table.
Yeah.
And I would have been well placed to go and work in one of those restaurants or perhaps go to France or something. But I didn't do that. I was yearning to work for myself, rightly or wrongly. So that's I think I was starting that process then.
So throwing back to a little bit of the childhood and the way you were brought up, I guess.
Yeah.
Sort of setting your own path, doing your own thing a little bit.
I think so. Not mad about working for people. Not very good at working for people. I'm completely unemployable now.
Me too.
But yeah, I definitely wasn't great at working for other people unless I really, really, really respected them and like Phil and John Williams and people like that. So, I've worked for Phil all day long, but there weren't many other people that I felt like I wanted to work for.
Which is super important.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was definitely searching out that road now. Yeah.
And how long did you do that for? How long did you have the placement for?
There's a couple of years, that one there, I think, and then the building got sold or the deal collapsed or something. I don't know what it was, but actually after that finished, and then it was a great period of time because I was working sensible hours, and I moved to Fulham, and I got married, and that was an amazing thing. I was 24. Well, I was 24 because I was 24 when I got married. And Vicky and I moved to Fulham, and it was an amazing chapter of our lives because we were actually living a bit of a life now. It was a really lovely chapter of our lives, and I enjoyed it. But that came to an end, not an abrupt end, but it did finish. And then Phil rang me and said, "Look, I've got this great idea. I'm going to open a chain of juice bars, fresh juice bars."
Yeah.
I've been to the States. I've seen these juice bars. They're incredible, wheatgrass and.
Because this wasn't as common as it is now, right? Like when you're doing this was quite new.
Oh, this is like 1998. This is not even in this, 2000.
Yeah.
I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. I had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Wheatgrass and smoothies and all these kind of crazy things. Spirulina, all these words that I'd never heard before. And he said, but we're going to do loads of salads and, beautiful brownies and smoothies and flapjacks and salads and smoothies. And he said, would you do it? Do you want to do it? And I said, yeah. I'm not doing anything. It sounds quite fun. Why not? Yeah, I'll do it. So we did. And that's actually how we ended up in Wandsworth, because we opened a CPU, or a central production unit. That is a very glamorous name for what was a shithole in a dip. Did you? Yeah, it was a shithole of a kitchen in a now knocked down building in the south side in Wandsworth.
It's sort of a dark kitchen before dark kitchens were a thing.
This was a very dark kitchen before dark kitchens were around. Yeah, we should have done set up Deliveroo would be set, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Should have done takeaway. So we did that, but that's the reason I now live in Wandsworth, because when we first bought our first little flat, that was in Earlsfield. So that was very short hop, skip, and a jump from the dark CPU. So I was managing that CPU for Phil for a couple of years, while him and the board of directors were building this juice business and opening various shops in London and moving in, getting sort of contracts with health clubs and gyms and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting. What was interesting for me there was more about sort of reporting to a board, reading a P&L, just understanding more about numbers, logistics, deliveries. These were like super difficult numbers as well. These were low margin, low cost, low margin stuff, and having to get that absolutely right. Managing a team of relatively unskilled workers,
Right.
Managing hours and things like that. So I was accumulating a whole bunch of different skills,
Yeah.
that I definitely hadn't had before that. So that was a very useful part of the jigsaw, I think.
Because it gives you what you, I guess, need today with running your businesses, is that initial insight, quite young as well, to be learning those things.
Yeah, it didn't give me all of it, but it certainly started it. And we did it for a couple of years, and in the end that ended for whatever reason. And if I'm honest, I just felt like this was the moment to do it. So like I said, we bought that little flat in Earlsfield, and we managed to leverage that to buy a restaurant in Clapham. That was
Which we'll come on to for sure. And
Sorry,
that's no, John. No. The one thing I want to ask you about is obviously running the juice bars, health. I know it's quite a big part of your life now, particularly on the running side and those sort of things. And I feel like going back to the rock and roll 90s, health with cigarettes and red wine probably wasn't at the top of the agenda. How were you looking after yourself when you were young?
absolutely not.
You weren't drinking, from what you just said.
No, I was drinking.
You were drinking?
Yeah, I was drinking, yeah. But not to excess or anything particular.
No.
Not all the time. Oh, but I was a normal 24-year-old doing what everyone else did in the 90s. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was not crazy, but I certainly wasn't looking after myself. Certainly, actually, I was playing squash quite a lot, but I wasn't like conscious of looking after myself or how I was eating or how I was exercising. I smoked at the time. It was like no. But I was 24. You're invincible, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's funny, isn't it?
This is never going to end.
Yeah.
This body can take anything, that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And, I'll work 100 hours a week. Yeah, I smoke cigarettes and drink this and do this and never sleep. And, but that is just not sustainable. But I wish I'd done that.
It's so interesting now, right? Because, 24...
It was fun, though.
It sounds like a lot of fun, yeah. It sounds great. But, now, 24-year-olds are Saturday run clubs and cold press juices, right? And it's just a different environment. And I wonder how you sort of see that, particularly within your team, where some of the chefs in your kitchen now, they must have done fantastic. It just must be completely different. And do you think it makes a massive difference to the work you do, the way that your team and generally everyone's now starting to care about themselves a little bit more? Do that actually make a big impact?
100%.
And do you think that you can achieve a lot more? Do you ever think, if I did it when I was younger, would I have achieved a little bit more, a little bit quicker? Is that
I'd never look back like that. Jeez, I'd never go forward if I kept looking back like that. I can't. I just I've done what I've done. I am where I am. That is that. Draw a line, move on, don't think about it. But to answer your previous question, more importantly, Trinity is so consistent now. And the energy these guys have, the consistent way they put the food up, they don't tire. They're on it. They're in on time. They're very rarely grumpy. They're never shouting, that kind of stuff. That all comes from the way that they look after themselves, the way that they approach life, the way that they, like you say, you're more likely to find these guys in the gym than you are the pub. You're more likely to, wait, what are you doing your day off? Oh, I'm just going on this sort of 20k run, or I'm going to do this high rocks thing, or I'm doing, okay, fine. That's a whole different world. And from that comes a bunch of girls and boys that are they're focused and they're on it and they're consistent. Yeah. They're consistent. The food's consistent. they're on it, the food's on it. It's a direct translation. I'm painting a slightly overarched picture. They're not all like that. These are normal people.
Yeah.
But definitely we don't have a culture like we had when we first opened, and the industry has moved on in such a great way. It's not all done yet, I can assure you. But, it's really great positive movement.
Yeah. It's massive. It's huge. Even I've noticed.
There's only 2 people that smoke in the whole of in the whole of Trinity. There's like 30 people work there.
Yeah.
Which is quite extraordinary. When I first opened, I think it was about 28.
Yeah, the other way around. Yeah. So you were saying after the juice bars, you then started your first restaurant.
That's right. So after the juice bars, I tell you a little poignant moment that I haven't said before. We were paid out a little bit of money for the end of that juice bars thing. I was offered another job in a juice bar company, and a juice company actually.
Oh, wow.
Surrey. They headhunted me. They rang me and said, "Do you want to come and work with us because you're finishing there?" So I said yes. I turned up so this was like an R&D job. I turned up and I was expected to wear a suit, and I was given a computer at a desk. And honestly, you were like, "What is I going on?" I came over white. I didn't know what to do. I was like all cold, and this was more scary than walking into any 3-star kitchen in the world for me. Really, I just thought this was that's terrifying. I did one day, and I drove home and said to my wife, "Look, we got that few quid we got from the end of that. Let's go on holiday." So we did. We went to the Maldives, actually. First time we went to the Maldives. So I quit that job.
Yeah.
And then I went to the Maldives. This is a true story. We got on the flight, went to the Maldives, we landed in Marley, and we went to the bar and got a drink in Marley, in the little airport where they transfer you out. And I bought a beer, and the guy gave me a $10 note in change from a $20 I gave him. And I put that $10 in my wallet, and I said to my wife, "I'm not going to work for anyone else from here on in. That's it." And she said, "Okay." And we had a long talk about this.
Wow.
And I still have that $10.
No way.
Yeah, promise you.
That must be, this is 2000? 2000, yeah, 2000-ish? 2001?
I'll send you a picture of it for the podcast.
That's crazy.
You'll have it in my wallet, yeah. And that was 2000. Yeah, 2001.
Yeah.
The very beginning of 2001. March 2001. And from there on in, I just thought, that's it. I'm going to go alone. Do you know what? I was really missing restaurants. I was missing cooking at a high level.
Yeah.
I was missing the banter, the camaraderie, the intensity. I was really missing that.
Because as you said before, you're in kitchens not just because of the food. You're there for every part of it, right?
Yeah, it kept me occupied. It kept me stimulated
Yeah.
all the time. And I sort of needed that. Still do. So that was important for me, and I was missing that. It was quite nice to have a balanced life, but that I'm not 25, 26. I'm not the guy who wants to just sit on the sofa and watch telly on a Wednesday night. I'm like, this is not happening. I want to be at work, doing something, out, hustling, cooking. I want to do something. I don't want to do this. So I was missing that as much as I was missing great food and great cookery, and which I hadn't done in those previous projects. So yes, essentially we bought a restaurant. Yeah.
Did you make the plan of the restaurant on that holiday? Is that where the idea came?
I did.
Wow.
Yes,
so you're doing a holiday trip. It's quite dangerous because you come on and that's a new idea.
Yeah.
Was there pure excitement when you were, I'm sure the beach and the hot weather and the cold beer probably makes it a bit more dreamlike. But for you, was it giving you, you can't remember?
Not really. There wouldn't have been that much excitement because there was no money.
I was going to say.
So it wasn't like I was looking at a bank account with a couple of $100,000 thinking that's going to make me a restaurant and this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
There was no money.
Yeah.
So this was literally, I think my wife would have been sat on the sun lounger reading a book, looking across at me, just sort of side-eyeing me going, yep, fine. Because ultimately there was no money. There was just my little sort of pipe dream thing. So
coming back to London, how did you go about opening your restaurant? What was the process? Where do you start? You've got 10 plus years of experience, well, even more now, in operations and kitchens and everything. And you put that together, and that's in the March. And I think you opened like September, right? Mm-hmm. Early September. Not a lot of time. Like, how did you go about that process?
My best friend at the time, a chap called Adam, who was my best man at my wedding. We worked at the Square together, did the juice bars together. He was a really great friend. We were super close. And we basically got together. I just bought a flat on a mortgage in Earlsfield. And I leveraged that flat. I will say I bought that flat on 110% mortgage, which you can't do that now.
110%.
Yeah. And then leveraged that flat and put it as first charge to buy the restaurant.
So you literally put your house online?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Adam came in with a similar proposition, and between the two of us, we bought a restaurant in Clapham that was an existing restaurant.
Right.
So I didn't need completely rebuilding from nothing. It just needed to be made nice. It was previously a fish restaurant owned by a very close friend of mine. So that's it. That's the story. But that's a horrendous thing to do. Not something it's not like I could you don't need to put a health warning and don't do this at home. I mean, certainly don't do that. Don't try this at home. However, you can't. That is not a thing, thankfully, that is on offer anymore. But that's how I did it. I had nothing. And within a month, or 2 months, I had a restaurant and a flat. And then I was mortgaged up to my eyeballs and leveraged up to my eyeballs. But you know what? I was 25, 26. I didn't care.
Did you not?
I didn't care. I was completely oblivious to, I felt indestructible. I knew I could cook, but this wasn't a confidence or an ego thing.
No.
This was an oblivious, just a bit.
Because I was going to ask you, did you find the pressure of it? But
No.
I guess not.
Not really.
Just enjoyment.
Not really. I put my mortgage on hold for a few months, and my dad helped me out with that while we were setting the restaurant up, and we had no money, income, whatever. So, and we just opened, and I just.
Do you remember opening it?
Like it was yesterday. Yeah.
Tell me about that, because that must have been a big moment for you.
It was, yeah.
Through everything, the craziness and the ups, the downs, the sideways, but
that was actually humbling. I won't lie. That was humbling because I went in this I definitely wasn't there wasn't ego there, but I was definitely pretty sure about this. I was pretty confident I could do this, having worked in restaurants like that. So I opened this little restaurant. I came up with this sort of concept of small plates, sharing plates. 20 different dishes, very low price point. And I look back at the menu now, it's incredible.
How low is the price point?
They're start at £3, the maximum of £12 for a plate of food, but they're all starter size plates of food.
Yeah.
And we had this tiny little kitchen on the first floor. We had a dumbwaiter, and we would offer people these 20 different dishes. And there was such a small price point that people would order 5, 6, 7 dishes because it was so small, so low price point. If you get a table of 4 ordering 6 different dishes times 4, and you've got a tiny kitchen that the parcel is only big enough for 5 plates, you're very quickly in the weeds. And I discovered that on day one when we didn't take any times on the reservations, believe it or not. So we just booked everybody in, and we didn't do a sort of let's do 25% of the restaurant's capacity on day one. Let's do 100%, and let's not give them a time. And let's not give them a restriction on the menu, and let's let them just order whatever they want. Now that, I can assure you, is a recipe for a heart.
How many of you in the kitchen?
For myself and Adam, 4 people, 2 other guys that have joined my band of merry men. Not everybody got fed, unsurprisingly, that night. And Phil and I was cooking with Phil the other week, and we were laughing about that night, actually. Because it was. I had to pull the service. I actually had to pull the service. A, I'd run out of everything. B, you sort of assume when all these people come for this soft opening, they're just going to order a couple of plates and get on.
Yeah.
And I remember Phil's table's orders come through, which was all 20 dishes. He just ordered the whole menu, and I was like, wow, okay. So I don't think I've ever been quite as in the weeds as I was then.
But I don't know, the night when the nights ended or the morning after, did it not feel great that people were even there? Like you'd opened a restaurant and
it felt terrifying. It felt utterly terrifying.
Really?
How was that even going to be possible? Thankfully, we opened the next day.
Yeah.
And there was nothing booked. So we just did a handful of covers. And the next day we did a handful and a couple more. And we did a few covers like that. And so it was a very slow build up for about the first 3 or 4 weeks. which was not great on cash flow, but it was good on us managing to work out how we were going to do this and start giving people times to arrive in our big diaries rather than letting them come when they like, and things like that. So, we figured it out. But that restaurant was interesting. What actually happened with that restaurant was it was in a very horrible location in Clapham, and and the food was really good. But only because I was trying to cook the square food in a tiny little environment with 4 cooks who were interested, and completely unrealistic expectations of trying to get this food that I knew from the square. And very quickly I had to adapt that, and that had to become different food because there was no way that was going to happen. And then what happened was a lady came in for lunch, and she came out to the kitchen to meet me, and she said, I do restaurant PR. And I said, I don't know what that is. What's that? So she sort of explained what it was, and she was a really lovely lady. And she said, I'm going to come back with my friend next week. And it turned out that was a lady called Maureen Mills, and she came back with the wonderful Faye Mashler, and they gave us an absolutely stonking review. And from there on in, the restaurant just went off the charts.
I was going to say, because this is when, not to discredit reviewers now and critics, but this is when a great review would determine almost your year, right? In many ways. Yeah. So, because the restaurant very quickly gained a lot of momentum in the years that followed, and a lot of success. What was, for you, I'm sure you were riding it and just focused on the day to day, but that must have meant a lot.
Yeah, it was just so heady. I don't remember much about it, but listen, we got that great review from Faye, and then, of course, there aren't that many restaurants at that time doing interesting things to review.
Right.
And so clueless, if I'm honest. So actually, very quickly, Matthew Fort came in, and Jay Rayner came in, and A. Gill came in, and Jan Moyer came in. So all of a sudden, inside 6 months, we had 5 of the biggest food critics through the door.
That's crazy.
And all of them were like 5-star reviews. There wasn't a bad review out of all those people. There was one more as well. I don't remember that at the time. I just remember this. And then Maureen very kindly was representing us, I think, and then we won this sort of Carlton TV Restaurant of the Year award. So we were invited to a black tie dinner. I didn't have a soup, let alone understand. This was all very weird,
Yeah.
And we were just a couple of guys, just literally living our best life, coming in and cooking and doing what we wanted and feeling like that we were on top of the world because all these people were writing amazing things about us. It was quite incredible. Anyway, we took a table of 10. They gave us a table of 10 at this.
At the awards.
ITV Awards, yeah. We were just a band of pirates, right? And we turned up at these awards. I think I wore my wedding suit, and we won this award against all these incredible chefs,
right?
That were, in my opinion, way more, significant than us,
right?
And yeah, we won this award, and we were suitably misbehaved. Yeah, it was great, as you should be at that age.
Yeah. How old are you at this point? 27, 28?
Yeah, 28. Yeah.
It must be. That must just have been an amazing time. 28. The age you are, the setup you have, the success you've kind of got.
And the lack of fucks given is not to be underestimated. I tell you, in terms of the general consensus of life, it just was all about just coming in and cooking and So yeah, that went on and was an incredible part of my life and my journey. It got way more recognition than a restaurant like that would now. We were very fortunate that we were in a much smaller pond, a much less saturated industry.
Timing was right on, basically. Yeah.
Timing was fortuitous.
Yeah.
And that paid off. Yeah.
And what happened to the restaurant?
What happened to the restaurant was that this clever clogs that was consulting for a place called the Hospital Club in Covent Garden approached us because we were pretty hot stuff right then, and Time Out Restaurant of the Year and all these awards we won. And they said, we love your restaurant. It's super current, brilliant. We want to put it into our new members club building in Covent Garden.
To move the whole concept out of that
Yeah,
4 walls and put it into a different.
yeah. Picking up the building would have been quite difficult. And we, whilst we were killing it in a lot of senses, we weren't making much money, and it was all a bit difficult and tiresome. We'd probably outgrown that restaurant actually within 2 years, 3 years. We outgrew it, and actually it seemed like a greater proposition. This was a huge brand new kitchen that had been put in for the amazing Charlie Trotter, bless him. So he'd designed and put in the kitchen, which was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the kitchen itself was worth 3 times the restaurant we were selling, so it's not like it was a no-brainer. And the promise of a beautiful restaurant, which somebody really important was designing. And we would do the food in the members club upstairs as well. So I thought, well, yeah, let's do it. And we are definitely just about 30 then, because my son was born. So we did it, and we sold the restaurant to raise the money to have us working capital to do this, because we were growing from 12 members of staff, including the 2 owners, to 120 staff.
Flipping out.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's not something you should do lightly. Or without a really good deal in place, which we didn't have. And the deal was just undercooked. We were completely undercooked in terms of capital, and paid the price really quickly. I also, I take my, I've got my lion's share of fault in all that as well. I just took the food from Time and transferred it there, right, because I assume that's kind of what you do, right? It's just not the way it works, right? You can't. One restaurant, one menu is right for that area, that time.
Yeah. That
building, those people. It's not about, but you can't just pick that food up and transfer it to something else, And I did that, and that was a mistake. But there were many mistakes, but that was one of the things we did wrong.
So when you did move, how long did it last in the new location for?
Like 8 months. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and we just folded the whole thing. Yeah. But, so that's kind of like, that's a 9-month journey of my 35-year career.
Yeah. And at the time, I'm sure. Yeah. So that's a phrase, isn't it? Where at the time it probably feels like a big chapter, and now it's just a line on a page as part of the journey that you go through.
Totally. But one that I learned an incredible amount from, and I am grateful for it, actually. I'm grateful for that experience, yeah, completely, because it grounded me, it slowed me down, it made me think, it made me be much more cautious in a good way. Yeah, it was good.
And it's one of those lessons that's worth learning when you're a bit younger.
Yeah.
Because you can take it into whatever else you do.
Yeah, for sure.
So did you have a break period before you then started Trinity? Between those two?
So the hospital club kept me on to open another restaurant there in the same space, which I sort of took because I needed income.
Yeah.
And I needed to pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
The sad bit about that, and the regretful bit, is that myself and my best friend then, Adam, we sort of parted ways and went different directions. We still talk, and I still love him, but we sort of, that relationship sort of gains distance, and that is a shame in a lot of ways.
I guess though, when you go through those things with even your best mates, it can be really testing of any relationship.
Absolutely.
Because it's emotional, you've got different perspectives, you blame yourself, you blame them. It's tough, especially when you're younger as well.
Yeah, there was no inward blame for sure, but we both had different agendas that we needed to foresee, and that was the only shame of it, really, because we were like brothers, yeah.
Sure. So starting Trinity, you wanted to go again, even after that?
Yeah, I was doing that. I was working in that new restaurant in the hospital club for them. I didn't really have any love. I was doing it for the paycheck, which was a very weird experience and a new one for me. And in all honesty, I'd heard of a restaurant come up in Clapham, the one I'd always wanted.
Oh, really?
Which was called the Polygon Bar and Grill. And it was in the best location in Clapham. It was the best building in Clapham. And I'd heard that it was on the market, but I didn't know that. So I just sent a cold email to the restaurant saying, "Would you like to sell the restaurant? I'm I'm interested in buying the restaurant." had absolutely, I had very limited resources. I didn't have the resources to back that email up. I will say that. And then somebody responded to say, I'm the owner. Please don't email the restaurant. Let's take this offline. So he called me and he said, I know who you are. Yeah. Because I was in Clapham, don't know if you're here, so for 4 years as a sort of competitor restaurant.
Yeah.
So he said, let's meet for a beer. And so I met that chap who was the landlord of the building,
right,
and the person that owned the Polygon Bar and Grill.
So in the business and the building.
Yes.
Right.
And we managed to do a deal over a few beers, and we shook hands. And 20 years later, Angus is still my business partner.
Is this so? Wait, he owned it before, and then you came in to him. That's insane. That's a mad story. That just one cold email, and he didn't want you to email the restaurant because I imagine they didn't know what was going on.
Correct.
And now that's insane. That's a mega story. So what did you want to do? So you obviously rebranded it. You changed a lot of things quite quickly then.
Yes.
And was that part of your proposition? Because how do you convince someone for you to come? I mean, I imagine your history and what he'd seen you do with time and other things must have been quite promising for him.
That was attractive for him. I think there was also a incredibly fortuitous timing wise. He wanted to get out of Polygon Bar and Grill at that point with another agenda. I needed another opportunity. I had a proven track record of filling a dining room in Clapham.
Yeah.
That was probably quite appealing as a landlord.
Yeah.
And we did a deal, and that is honestly, that is the long and short of it. And we've just gone on a 20-year journey together.
Insane.
And he's sort of very much, he's absolutely brilliant at what he does for the business. And he's absolutely brilliant at leaving me alone to get on with what I'm really good at in the business. Yeah. And he doesn't step on my feet and tangle me up and second guess me and, get involved in the stuff that I'm good at. That's quite rare to find in Deficit's partner. And equally, I'm incredibly respectful and grateful for the input that we get from him as a business partner. So it's just been a brilliant partnership.
Yeah.
And
starting a restaurant where you've owned the building as well at that time, effectively in your partnership, like being the landlord and the business owner, not just an operator. That's also very rare. I mean, right? Especially in those times, there was a lot of landlords, and there's plenty of stories of amazing restaurants who've closed because of landlord disputes. So having that leverage as well must have been great confidence for you guys, for both of you.
Well, it was bloody good when COVID came along.
I was going to ask you about that. It means that there's some adjustments that can be done. What was the idea and kind of concepting then behind Trinity initially? And is that very much what it still is today?
The answer to that is, the short answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the strategy there was, I've just lost my shirt pretty dramatically. And that hurt. And I ain't going back there again. This is not going to happen again.
Right.
So we need to do something that is, be absolutely sure I am doing this to fill a dining room. I had no agenda or strategy other than to fill a dining room. There was none of this kind of, I want to cook my food, I want the food to be like this, or any of that. I was absolutely only about, this has to work. Now, there were a few restaurants in London at the time that were absolutely killing it, in my opinion, doing beautiful things, and that was the Nigel's beautiful chain of restaurants in Chez Bruce, in the Ledbury. Sorry, Chez Bruce, mainly Chez Bruce, Trompette, Glass House and Kew, Medlar. Those are the restaurants I looked at and thought, those are proper restaurants. Those are proper neighborhood restaurants. They're proper local restaurants where people will support, be loyal to. And I come from a road of food that is very similar to those restaurants. So this is not inconceivable that if we build a beautiful dining room that is about the guest, and I cook food that is of a similar sort of ilk to those restaurants, it's not inconceivable that this might work. So, although we are in Clapham, and 20 years ago, Clapham was not what it is today. You couldn't get a taxi to take you to Clapham, let alone, open a restaurant and sell truffles and sea bass and caviar. So there was another proposition there, but that's essentially what I used as the sort of guideline, if you like, to build Trinity from the beginning.
And every decision you're making is focused on going back to that.
Yes, sort of. But I also wanted it to be an individual in a lot of ways. And we also didn't have tons and tons of money. This wasn't done off of a huge budget. It was done off of quite a modest budget. And we had to do the restaurant all the way back to the, wiring and plaster and everything else. So it was a big undertaking, and it took about 4 or 5 months to do. And yeah, that's it. That's how we did it.
Opening it up for the first time, that first sort of week, year, day, I don't know how much you can remember, but the second opening of your career at that point, you've obviously had a very successful one first time around. Was there any kind of hesitations, any kind of nervousness around, it must be hard being successful so quickly with time, you know what I mean? It must be difficult in your mind going into Trinity the way I would think about it, that, God, I hope it's as good as that, and that level of pressure, or was that not really existed for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I knew that trajectory of time that was on, there was no way I could rejoin that train.
Right.
That had left the station. Right. I'd had my arse smacked. I'd been put in my place, and this was about starting from zero again and building this up again. Right. So my trust from the industry, trust in me from my guests, trust in me from media, which is important.
Yeah.
All that had to be redone. We're starting from a clean slate. So let's have a little bit of humility here, and let's just get your head down, shut your mouth, and cook. Right. So that was kind of where it was. Not that I was mouthy or anything like that.
No, okay, so.
And coming off the back of a restaurant that had collapsed, opening that first day, cooking like that was very scary, actually.
Brilliant.
But the good news is we booked people in with timies. We only filled the restaurant a third full.
Yeah.
And we had the right amount of staff, and we limited the menu. So we had a really successful night. Everyone got really jolly. It was a lot of fun. We had a couple of glasses afterwards, and we celebrated opening this great thing that we would hope would be here for as long as it could be. And it felt like a celebration and opening, as it should, rather than feeling like the last day on earth like the other one did. So this was amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I felt incredibly proud to be back at the helm of something so magnificent that Trinity was at the time. And then I remember the menu when I opened. I sort of had this. I took the Trinity name, and so we did starters and main courses and puddings, or first, second, and third courses. And it was all written just in 3 words as Trinity, so it might say sort of grouse, elderberries, and apple, or might say apples and caramel and star anise or something like that. So just 3 words. It was really nice, actually. I love that concept. There was sort of an a la carte and a tasting menu at the time. Don't know why we ever veered off from it. I might bring it back. There you go.
Some very reflective thoughts.
Yeah.
Was there a point, and I'm interested to hear your response to this, in the earlier days, the first couple of years, months or whatever it was there a point where you felt successful with Trinity, where you go, we've made it?
No, I wore the humility badge and the sort of self-doubt badge for a very, very long time. We won. We had an incredible review from the brilliant Giles Corrin, a off-the-charts review. We had a great review from Faye, great review from loads of people came back, actually, and reviewed really positively. And we won, what did we win? The Time Out Restaurant of the Year. We won the AA Restaurant of the Year. We had 3 rosettes. We had, the accolades and the sort of the goodwill, if you like, from the media end of it was piling in as a nod of, okay, you're all right now. You can come out of hiding. I felt like that. I felt like it was kind of all right again to, okay, we forgive you. You're okay. You're back on again. So that's fine. And chefs are coming back in, and I was doing a few little demo things with chefs things. So I felt like the industry had kind of got over that little blip of mine, and people were working for me, and people were applying to work for me, which was quite a nice sight. So we felt confident.
Yeah.
So we carried on, but I don't think I ever felt like we were killing it or winning at life or anything like that. No, we were grafting day to day. The problem is, actually, the biggest issue there is that I was so sort of grateful for the opportunity that my partnership with my business partner represented.
Yeah.
So sort of scared of going back to ending up in the position I had before that I just threw myself at this thing head first. And I was working like an absolute idiot because it's the kind of, it's a bit like that ostrich thing. I just thought the harder I work, the less likely this is to fail.
Yeah.
Stupidly and
It's so common though.
Unbeknownst to me.
Yeah.
That is, you know what? It's a really difficult one because, and I was working 6 lunch and dinners a week for 3 or 4 years, like $6 a week.
3-4 years.
I was opening the restaurant myself, closing the restaurant myself. I was cleaning the kitchen. I was doing all the prep, running the sauce and the pass for 3 or 4 years in the beginning of that restaurant. And it hospitalised me twice.
Hospitalisation?
I had loads of issues, septicemia, and my appendix went out. I got so run down. I had to go to the hospital and get intravenous and all this stuff. Anyway, none of it I'm proud of. I'm not saying this from any kind of bragging rights. I'm saying this from how stupid am I.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Because here's the blunt irony of all this. I was working like this. I was not nice to be around. I wasn't great for my team. I wasn't great for my family. My own personal health and well-being was absolutely rock bottom. I had a full dining room. We were making money and we were doing really nice food and getting accolades. But all the rest of it behind the scenes was falling apart at the seams. But the irony of all of this is that I am currently over 6 dining rooms. I run them at different capacities. Some of them I own.
Yeah.
Some of them I'm a shareholder. Some of them I'm a consultant. But I am involved in 6 restaurants, if you like, every day of the week. When I wake up in the morning, there are 6 end of day reports on my phone. Mm-hmm. So currently, we are dealing with thousands of customers a week.
Yeah.
We are delivering that via my food ethic, if you like, right? Sure. Through all those restaurants. And the team of people that are delivering all that is enormous, in the hundreds. And it is my own personal business is a relatively big business. Mm-hmm. I currently have the best work-life balance. I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I think we're doing consistently the best we've ever done as a business. How is it that I had to nearly kill myself to cook for 220 covers a week back in 2006?
Yeah.
I had to do all that and nearly kill myself to do something that wasn't consistent and was so painstakingly difficult. Whereas now I can sit here in this podcast with you now while my restaurant is completely full and we're all fine, right? And know that is happening. But in some ways it doesn't work like that. You need to put in the hard yards, right? You need to do that time in the beginning of a restaurant where you feel that sense of sort of sufferance and you're breaking this in, right? And you're getting to understand all the nuances of the restaurant and the business so that you can then relay that onto people. You're building DNA, you're building culture, aren't you? And there's no quick symptom to that. So it's a two-way thing. I sometimes think,
crazy, yeah.
How is it that I nearly killed myself doing this thing for a very small amount of covers, really? But yet now we're able to do all of this and I could go on holiday and be absolutely fine.
What do you think has changed, though? Is it the fact that you were going, and I think learning curve is a big understatement of a statement there, but like, is it because you were learning it so hard, so fast about running your first spot at such a high standard and doing it the wrong way? Or is it because there's a slight element of economies of scale where you are now? Like, what's the difference? Or is it just literally the approach, the way you looked at it?
People.
Let's talk about that. The people you've had, I mean, I think you've got I saw a piece of content on one of your pages where you were chatting with one of your staff who's been with you for 20 years.
Yeah.
I think he works at the front of house from the looks of things. Like, how do you approach people now versus how you did when you first opened?
Well, firstly, massive shout out to Alan, who's actually worked for me for 24 years.
That's yeah.
Sid's time. He was there on day one.
Really?
At time as a kitchen porter, and he's worked all over my business, and I've no idea what he does now, but he's still in my business. He's and I love having him there.
It's amazing.
I love him dearly. He's like part of my family. But what was the question?
Just in terms of how you approach building teams, bringing people in. You mentioned earlier, people knocking down your door wanting to work with you at Trinity. When it started to come back and feel like something. How, those early days is where you were maybe being hard on yourself. How are you approaching team then versus how you approach them now? Because that feels like the variable that's made your life a lot better.
Okay, so that's a really good point, and I think that there is something important to understand here. There's sort of two sides to Trinity, right?
Right.
Trinity's, let's call it 20 years old. It's not, but nearly 20 years old. So there's almost two 10-year restaurants, and it was two very different restaurants.
Right.
And that's quite important to understand in this context. So I opened that restaurant in 2006, 2010 years later, so 2015, we closed it 9 years later. We closed it for 4 months. We built a flat on the very top, a residential flat. We redid the whole thing. And when I say redid it, we stripped it all the way back to the walls, the wiring, the plumbing. We redid the entire building. This was not the thick end of a seven-figure project. Right?
Wow. Is this before or after you got your first star?
This is 2015 before we had a star.
Right.
So we'd already operated for 9 years. It was hellish and hard and difficult, and the building was difficult, and it fell apart after 9 years.
Damn.
So did I. And it was a very hard place to work.
Yeah.
Because of the way it had been built and the way we were, and trying to sort of make a name for ourselves. Also the environment outside was all still roads that had all been now been converted into pedestrianisation. That's helped a lot, things like that. So that's the first 10 years of that restaurant. The second 10 years is kind of post 15 when we've got this brand new restaurant, and now the approach to getting staff then was very much about people weren't applying in their droves. If somebody applied to work there, we generally took them, and we did our best to keep them, and I think we did our best to sort of, I think the appeal of that restaurant to work in then was the fact that the guy that owned it was doing 90% of the work, actually, and therefore you could learn loads from him, and he was there, and you could get to the raw end of this, and that's quite a hard thing to find in restaurants, actually, now. But so that was quite appealing.
Yeah.
And then I think the second end of it is when we've been much more considered about who we employ, how we employ them, much more aware and concerned with our DNA and our culture and who we are and what we represent, what's our language, how do we want to be perceived. Yep. This stuff is now really, really important to us. This is the stuff that we prioritize.
Right.
Believe it or not. The sort of the business textbook will tell you that morally and to some extent legally, as a director, you have got the obligation to the shareholders, number one, first and foremost. I absolutely don't believe that, and I think it should be if you prioritize your team over your guests and your shareholders. So actually, the number one is the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get that right. You get that culture right. You get that teaching right. You give people substance and belief in themselves. You give people purpose. You give people a road. You give people pride. And if you give people an opportunity to learn and better themselves and level up, they are absolutely going to look after your guests. And then your guests are absolutely going to look after your shareholders. And it works that way round. And if for me, that's how it works. So that's sort of, does that answer your question about?
Definitely does.
Yeah.
And I guess the question to follow on from that is, you made a few comments earlier that maybe it wasn't always like that, particularly at Trinity, in terms of the way you're looking at team, etc. And I think that's fair to say from what you said. What made you change? what made you, because what you just explained for me makes complete sense, and it's the aspiration I have as a business owner to try and, you know, encourage that as much as possible. And it's difficult when you grow and whatever, but if you weren't like that when you first opened your doors and you are there now, how did that just change over time? What is there something you can point out that put you in the position that you are today?
I'm not entirely sure. I think probably an accumulation of time and just getting older, getting a bit wiser, and wanting for the restaurant to be, I want the restaurant to be more than just sort of striving for day-to-day survival and day-to-day, can we get on blast today? Can we survive this week? Will we get through the end of this month? Will we get through another year? Actually, let's take a step back and look at this and say, well, actually, I want this business to be here for 25, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
I want this to be an institution. And not in an arrogant way, but in a sort of, if I don't do anything stupid, this restaurant should be there for a very long time and serve its Clapham residents and beyond for a very long time. And it should be an amazing place for people to grow. And I think knowing that the culture we had and the way we were and the way we were employing people and the way people were working in the business and the lack of retention we had, perhaps looking at all that and just thinking that's not sustainable. That doesn't marry with my ambitions for the sustainability of the restaurant. So something's got to change, right? But that was also a point where I wasn't particularly happy, so I sort of started to change myself as well. So
there's that kind of moment where it all, you know, this doesn't align, let's do something different. And see how it's at.
Yeah, kind of. I think it's a bit more blurry than I'm trying to explain to you.
No, but I think,
you know, it's something around that. Yeah.
The thing I take from it is time and experience. You know, the longer you are almost around in some ways as an owner, as an operator, the smaller details that you go through. And God, I lost 2 guys who I wish we didn't lose. Why? You know, you start to ask the questions, and sometimes, you know, everyone that's trying to build restaurants, run businesses, etc., it's all, I need to be perfect now. And actually, sometimes time is the biggest thing.
Absolutely.
I've learned that myself. You got a star after about 9-10 years after you'd done the refurb. Was that always a plan to try and get a star?
I was never really. I'd come from starred restaurants. I'll be honest, it was never massively a focus before that.
Yep.
Before 2015. You know, it would have been nice if it came along, but that wasn't the ambition. It was more about, I was much more concerned with having a busy, successful restaurant that was profitable and robust. Yeah, that was more important to me than any accolade. In 2015, we sort of opened the restaurant with a brand new, we spent a lot of money, we redid the whole restaurant, put a flat on the top, built the upstairs restaurant. Yeah. We had this new proposition. I'd had 4 months of managing this building project, but not working day to day like that. So I'd had a little bit of a rest, if you like. And I just felt like this was the time to go for it. So we sort of opened with an ambition that we felt like this was a restaurant that should be a Michelin star.
Yep.
Should be of that level. We wanted to get recognition for cooking that level, but it wasn't sort of like the only thing that mattered. It was more a case of, let's be the best version we can possibly be. And we had all new shiny plates and new shiny stuff and new
freshness
and renewed energy, and all that stuff. So we ploughed that on, and 10 months later we got a star.
Amazing. And you've had it ever since. You mentioned something there about being the best version of yourselves as a team, as a restaurant, as a business, and standards. It's something that's often kind of spoken about in kitchens, and obviously having a star, there's a level of that every year your standards are assessed and monitored. How do you think you can keep high standards in any business, even in a restaurant?
Very, very easily. You just make sure you're going forward.
Right.
That's it. Do not accept now as the benchmark. If you say that's where we are now standard wise as a business, as long as we stay exactly like that for the next 12 months, we'll be absolutely fine. I don't believe in that. I think that's impossible, because you will have variation, you will dip, and you'll get complacent, and you'll get lack of consistency, and you'll get slight fatigue. Okay, so unless you're pushing forward, for me, you're going backwards. I really believe that. And that pushing forward gives renewed energy. It gives people focus. It gives people a reason to get up in the morning. It gives people a reason to think.
Yeah.
and it gives people a purpose, right? So continually pushing forward. And listen, if you're pushing forward and you're not quite getting there,
Yeah.
at least you're not where you were, and at least you're not going backwards. That's my theory.
How do you, where you sit today, you're not in the kitchen and every single day, just in Trinity, you're doing lots of other things. And I know you've now got head chefs and etc. You've obviously got a closer team, right? There must be a smaller circle, a part of the bigger circle. How do you work with them? And how do you take those ethoses, those learnings, your perception on things, and how do you communicate with your number twos, your head chefs, etc.? Or is your approach different massively to them versus a KP or one of your assistants or something like that?
There's a few things in there. I think if you're going to be a successful business owner, one of the things that you have to master is understanding that everybody needs to be treated differently, and giving, not every single person, there isn't a blanket approach to managing everyone. You know, I have a great relationship with my KPs, but I don't have a similar diet with them. I talk about football, and I talk about, you know, the stuff that's relevant to we have our own little dialogue, right?
Yeah.
I have conversations with my waiters and waitresses in the restaurant, and some of that is kind of, you know, talking about where they used to work or where their mum's at with this, or that relationship is another relationship. It's completely different to the one with the KPs. I have a relationship with my head chef that's, you know, and we have lots of texts and bits and pieces. That's a completely different relationship.
Yeah.
And all of these relationships are completely different. And that's about understanding what makes people tick. That is about making sure that people feel like they're invested in, make people feel like they are working in a business that cares about them, has got a plan for them, has got a progression plan for them, and cares, right? Now, there's only so much time in one's week that you can give, right? But as long as you are there, and when you're there, you're in the moment. You're not just passing by.
Yeah.
You're actually in that moment with that person, giving them your actual time that is meaningful time. That's really important. I do not get that right all the time, but that's something that I aspire to try to do. In terms of the dialogue with you're right, there is a core team of about 8 or 9 people that I work really, really closely with.
Right.
And basically what I do with those people is we meet as much as we can during the week. In the morning, 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, we will meet for half an hour and just go over the day's business, the VIPs, the issues, the maintenance, the events coming up, the VIPs coming up. I give an overview of what I'm doing. The digital marketing guys might talk about what they're doing.
Yep.
Just making sure that everybody's kind of threaded is kind of what I like to think about that. But equally, and I mean this equally as well, I'm sitting there watching the way that we just go around the table, you know, you speak, but
yeah.
I'm actually sitting there watching the whites of the eyes and seeing, I can get a real good sense of where my team are at.
Right.
And also the different relationships that are going on across the table. You can see that in the body language, right? You can see it in the way they are. You can see how happy they are, or stressed, or under the cost they are, or out of their comfort zone with this particular project they are. And then you can take that offline and you can manage that. I think that's kind of how that comes about. So that's really important. And then we have this system. It's kind of just in terms of managing people in a way that isn't, I don't micromanage people. Absolutely refuse to. I'm true belief that if you bring someone into your business and you pay them good money and they're the right person, you do not need to micromanage them. You should just expect them to deliver the job. And it's your job to support them in doing that. Give them the tools, support them, manage their expectation, but also manage your own. Right? So I have the system where the 8 people, including me, are on that, and in that whole system is a kind of working on list. I don't like the word to-do list, it's a bit stupid, but like I'm working on these projects.
Yeah.
And I can basically move those tasks into someone else. Someone else can move them along. I can add a task to someone else. So I have to send someone a 2-line email saying, would you mind, you know, designing a new menu for that restaurant, please? I can just move it into a task, right? So it's kind of is there, but also it's a diary visualization, so they can all see everyone's diary. And in my diary, they all see my whole diary. Everything is in there, exactly what I'm doing, what I'm doing. And that includes when I'm with my daughter, when I'm running, when I'm away with my wife, everything that I do is all in my diary. It's all exposed to those people. What I'm working on is exposed. So if there's stuff that I'm working on, they know it's being covered, right? It stops me having to look at those people and think, I wonder if someone's worked out that the extract needs to be deep cleaned next week, or it's all I can see. It's already on someone's agenda, and that helps me because I don't have to micromanage. I don't have to chase people. I know where people are at. I can also see where they're overwhelmed, and I can see where they've got too much going on, and I could dial down their. I need 2 more things from that person, but I'll hold off till next week. We just manage it like that.
Transparency then is a big part of it.
Yeah, I love that transparency and that openness between a senior team where they can all support each other. And I don't want them to be competitive against each other. I don't like that. I don't want to create that.
But that was the environment you grew up in, right?
Well, as a chef, yes. I think the chefs need to be competitive against each other like that. Yes, I think that's healthy. But when you're at a senior level and you're caring for other people, no.
Interesting.
No, because people will be selfish and you can't have that. And they will be about themselves, and we can't have that.
I love that approach. It must be so refreshing to be a part of that team to reseal.
It's not perfect. I promise you. I'm painting a much more perfect picture than it is.
But then again, I guess
because it's never perfect, right?
Yeah, but you can't be.
But that's what I'm painting for you is what we're doing, what we're trying to be.
Yeah,
we're trying our very best to be.
Yeah,
because we're about to grow next year quite a lot. We're doing quite a lot of great stuff next year. We're growing quite a lot. It's now kind of how we set this business up for growth that is in a way that's stable and the foundations are stable and we're not growing from a platform that's completely unstable.
Yeah.
That's what scares me the most. So
interesting. Why do you think Trinity's managed to stay around for as long as it has?
Because it's always been guest focused. I think it's always been about the guest. It's looked after its community.
Yeah.
It's interwoven into its community. It's been loyal to its community and it's not tried to be anything it's not. I think there's been a good choice of people and I've been very good at retaining people. I've been lucky and good at retaining great people. And in a restaurant like that, retention of great people is everything because then you get consistency of food.
You should say, yeah.
But listen, don't ever think that it's about food. No one walks into Trinity hungry or thirsty. They walk into Trinity because they want 2 hours of escapism from the real world. What we actually sell is escapism. We sell 2.5 hours of unadulterated, pleasurable escapism where you're actually going to get fed really nice food. You're going to get served really nice wine and someone's going to make you feel like you are important and wonderful. And you're going to get enveloped in all that amazing hospitality. And then we're going to spit you out the other end in 2.5 hours. And you're going to feel amazing. You've not done it to your phone. You've been chatting to someone you really care about opposite you. That's what we sell. That is what we sell. We don't sell food and wine. And I think once you realise that, then you build a team around that.
Yeah.
And you understand what you're selling is an experience. Then you're off to the races.
You must be so proud of Trinity. Like, I know everyone will say that to you a lot. And I imagine from speaking with you for over an hour, like, the way that your mind works on wanting to look forward and not maybe reflect too much on the back, but to get it where it's been through, you've been through the COVID stuff, and I tend not to ask people about COVID because I think we all should forget it in some ways, and economic issues and all those variables. For you, looking back and walking into that building, how do you feel about Trinity?
Oh, I'm immensely proud of it. I don't think as an industry, probably not, but maybe even as a race, we don't celebrate success enough, do we?
Yeah.
That I do find that annoying, and I'm definitely a culprit for that. If I think about all the things I've achieved at Trinity, they are significantly more successes than should be for the cards I was dealt, without a shadow of a doubt. I would take half those successes and I could finish my days knowing that I've done more than I really should have done.
Really?
But I don't celebrate all that because actually I'm just not wired that way. I'm more wired to sort of be fearful of what could happen. I'm always terrified it's going to go horrendously wrong.
Really?
You know, yeah, completely. Yeah, there's never a moment where I just think, oh, we're set, we're sorted, we've got this, we're all over this, this is not a problem, or this is easy, or none of those things, none of those words or phrases ever enter my mind. I'm always in a state of, unless we are not over this all the time, this will go horribly wrong. Because we are also living we are also on the edge always. We're pushing the restaurant, we're pushing the business, all of my team are stretched. We're never in a place of fat or just sloppiness. And so there's never that place where we can sit and just sort of think, oh, we've got this,
Yeah.
We're always on the edge. So that means that it can either go horribly wrong or it can really push. And that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a level of fear, right, that you're kind of explaining there, because I personally resonate with that. I kind of live in constant fear for I've always have done.
And there's not fear. It's a place of uncomfortable.
Yes.
And that's all.
Yes.
People are not very good at being uncomfortable.
No.
And actually, I didn't make this up, but ultimately, all the good stuff is on the other side of uncomfortable. And the quicker you realize that, and the quicker you get comfortable being uncomfortable, the more successful you will be.
Is there any way you can just become a little bit more comfortable quite easily? Or is it really just around keeping it going?
I think the comfortable is the danger zone.
Right.
Because if you get to that point where that business was paying me out enough money to, drive Ferraris and buy boats and buy villas in all over the world, and am I really gonna wake up every morning and the first thing I think about is that restaurant? No, because I'm comfortable, right? So comfortable is actually that's a whole other challenge that people have to manage at that level. I am not at that level, obviously. This is still my main income. It's what I do. It matters to me and my family enormously, obviously. So, there's no danger of that. But I think people can get really comfortable, and with comfortable comes complacency, and that's where you're in the danger zone massively. And I see that a lot.
Really? I really resonate with what you're saying. I've run a business for just over 10 years, nowhere near your stripes, and I've gone through everything with it, right? I don't think there's anything I haven't really gone through, and there's some more stories in there. But I think where I got to at what point is I like being uncomfortable. I used to hate it, but it's the reason why I use fear is because sometimes there's days where I just want to feel a little bit more at peace, right? And I think the thing that I've always had the fear is this kind of gold medal syndrome as well, right? You start to achieve things and you're always on to the next. And I think where I am in my career, sometimes I look back and I go, oh, I wish I enjoyed that year a bit more, because it was actually a great year, but all you were doing is focusing on the negatives. And the people I've had on this podcast and some of the things you've said resonate and have been said by many different individuals, but it's kind of trying to take elements of that and go, do you know what? You are in the uncomfortable bit, but try and enjoy it. Like, that's the bit that I've always tried to be working out, because sometimes I love it and I look back and I love it, but at the moment when it's tough and it's difficult, and you must have had your fair share of that, your stories when you were younger in your 20s and just, house is mortgaged, high levels of risk, but enjoy it. Like, those are great, because as you do get older, there's more responsibilities, there's more pressure, and also I imagine the more you've got success and you've kind of clasped success, it must be a different level of uncomfortable, because there's more pressure and risk and all these variables that can play into it. Yeah. So what does it take? What does it take to build what you've built and do the things you're doing and have the career you've had?
It takes a level of courage. It takes craft. You need to have a craft. You need to have you need to have learned your craft and know that well, so that you can use that old adage that is around now, is that you're not paying me for these 30 minutes. You're paying me for the 35 years it led me to give you what I'm going to give you in 30 minutes, right? You need your craft. That's really important. You need a level of humility, and if you don't have that, forget it. And I think you need sort of unwavering ambition, and drive, and attention to detail. All those things, like, they're common traits in a lot of people that are successful.
Yeah.
yeah, I just think you need all those things. And the biggest one for me is resilience. Resilience is the biggest one. And I say it's the biggest one because you've got to keep getting up and when you get knocked down. And that is not easy for people. That is hard. And resilience is something that I worry about because I don't see much resilience. I'm using a huge brush. But in some of the people that I employ that are younger,
Agreed.
I worry about their level of resilience.
Yeah.
And I don't say that in an old man critical way.
No, I agree with you.
Say that as a concerned citizen looking at another generation and thinking, that might not play out well for you.
I mean, I speak to...
Because life is life, right?
I speak to business owners and friends who are running agencies, companies, restaurants, and, resilience is a massive piece, and that's not to say, I've spoken about this before, but the way that teams are treated, you've perfectly explained how you operated with your team when you started versus where you are now, and employing people and what people should be entitled to, and the advice you gave your daughter at the very start, like all those things are amazing. But if you don't have the resilience piece, it's making younger generations, my generation, respectfully to you, but my generation, it's difficult because the opportunities are getting less, because what opportunities are looking for is resilience to come on that opportunity, take it and make what you can of it. And I completely agree with you. And it's the one thing that I speak to a lot of people about, my age, younger, even sometimes older, that you've got to show a level of resilience, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Life is hard.
Yeah.
Jobs are hard. If you want to achieve anything, it's hard.
I agree with everything you just said. The good news is resilience is tactile. Resilience is something that can be trained and taught. Yeah, you can go to the resilience gym.
Yeah.
Okay. So I won't bore you with the whole story, but my daughter runs with me a lot now. She didn't run. She does now.
Nice.
Partly, it partly is for her fitness and mental health. Great.
Yep.
But she's 16, and what I tell her is, I go for a run with her. And there's a point in that run, most days, not every day of the week, but a few times a week.
Yeah.
There's a point in that run where she looks at me and she's like, I want to stop. I'm knackered. It's hard. And all I say to her is, nothing today is going to be harder than the next 10 minutes of your life. And if you can get through that next 10 minutes, there is nothing that's going to come along today that will be more difficult than that next 10 minutes where your body is screaming for you to stop. Yeah. You're telling it no.
Yeah.
You are controlling it. You are owning that body that is telling your body to keep going and push through. Mm-hmm. If you push through and you get to the other end, you stand there, you've finished it, you've done it, you've turned your watch off, you owned that. You've pushed yourself through that barrier, right?
Yeah.
And no matter what happens today, it ain't going to be as hard as that. That's resilient. That's physical, actual, the resilience gym. And I'm not saying it's fixed all our problems. I'm not saying that.
No, cool.
That's crazy.
It's a huge part.
But it's definitely building her resilience to knowing that I can do hard stuff and it doesn't scare me. And I can keep doing it and I can keep doing it. So if you're going to throw something hard at me, I'm not going to fall over, I'm not going to melt or turn into a bag of bones. I'm going to get on with this.
Insane. I love that advice. Tell me about the future. You've mentioned a few things next year. Tell me a little bit more what you've got planned.
Yeah, we've got a few things planned. We're going to do this beautiful project in Fulham, where we are now.
Sensational.
Yeah, in the Fulham Pier project. That's exciting. Brasserie Constance, we're going to open that in May next year. Bistro Unit, Trinity, upstairs. My work with the wonderful people at Brown's Hotel, I love dearly. And we're in discussions at the moment with another project for September, October next year, which is really exciting. I can't talk about it because we haven't even got over the heads of terms yet, but that's really exciting.
Yeah.
That's something completely left field, a restaurant, but really left field. So that's really exciting. And I'll tell you about that in due course. And then we're sort of ploughing on with this whole social side and the digital marketing end of things, which is sort of a new world that's opened up to me that I'm enjoying. I'm enjoying exploring and learning and working with new, young, creative, cool people. Yeah. And doing something that I'm experiencing a new thing. So it's great. Life is great. My business could be much better than it is. My team are just the lifeblood of our business, and I love them dearly. Yeah. And I'm probably the happiest I've been. So I'll take more of that, please, for 2025.
Sounds great. Adam, thank you. It's been amazing to hear the stories. the advice, the education. I mean, I've learned a lot just in a very short period of time from you today, so I really appreciate it. And congratulations, because I'm sure you hear that a lot, but I genuinely mean that, because hearing that story of what you've been through is incredibly inspiring for me personally. So thank you. Best of luck for 2025. Enjoy it. I'm sure you will. And I'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me on, Ollie.
Cheers.